Hare Krishna, Mataji. Welcome everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So if you don't feel too shy, you can all put your videos on. You don't have to, but makes it more interactive, that's all. Makes it easy for me. And, so we're going to start again with the Srimad Bhagavatam overview. And we've done 2 sessions so far. And we covered the first 3 chapters in the first one, the second 3 chapters of the first canto in the second one. So we can just recap on what we already done. It's good to go over things and it sticks. The whole point in this exercise is not like Krishna's pastime so much or get into too much philosophy. It's just so we have as I mentioned before, a reasonable understanding of how the Srimad Bhagavatam is laid out. And then, you know, if we can remember that, it makes it more easier to read and to follow. Okay. So, the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Okay, so if you all mute your microphones and then if there's some interaction, you can unmute it and speak. But it just makes a reception much easier. So we'll just briefly go over what happened over the last 2 weeks. We started with the first chapter and we established the qualification of the attributes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth. That's the subject matter of the Bhagavatam. And then we established the Srimad Bhagavatam being the spotless Purana and capable of delivering knowledge of the Supreme. Then the process in the 3rd verse was how this knowledge is passed down in disciplic succession and the qualification for speaking and the qualification for hearing. So these are 3 important things before we start any literature. We have to know what we're talking about, the qualification of the book and the speaker. Then there were 6 questions which were answered in the first 3 chapters. Anybody remember? What is the best occupation? And we said the occupation which brings us to devotional service. Second question, what is that occupation we should be ultimately coming to? Bhakti. third question, why does the Supreme Lord appear in this world? To deliver those in the mode of goodness. Then two questions, pretty similar. What's the Lord's pastimes in this world? That is, as the Purusha avatars, and that's the ones who create this material world and maintain it. And the Leela avatars, those who perform pastimes in this world to attract the consciousness souls. And last question is, when Lord Krishna's left, where do we go for real religion? And it's answered that in the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that finished the second. So these were answered in the second chapter. And then towards the end of the second chapter, we spoke about, the mode of goodness is Lord Vishnu. And then we spoke about the Purusha avatars. And in the third chapter, we carried on, then the Leela avatars. And the Supreme Avatar, Ete Chamsha Kalapum Krishna, Bhagavan Swayam. He's the leader of all the avatars. And then we spoke a little bit about how the Lord manifests to those who are not devotionally orientated in the universal form. Then how we relate to him directly. So that brought us to the end of the third chapter. So there's a comprehensive understanding of devotional service in the first three chapters, actually. Prabhupada ensured that we get that right at the beginning. And then we went into the fourth chapter. And this was talking about the appearance of Narada Muni, how Vyasadeva was contemplating writing Srimad Bhagavatam. So he divided the Bhagavatam into four, and gave them to different rishis to distribute. The Vedas into four, the original Veda. And then when he wrote all that, he felt unsatisfied, so Narada Muni came and asked him what the problem was, and Narada Muni gave him the answer: you haven't glorified the Supreme Lord. And those rishis who don't glorify the Supreme Lord, then they're of no use to society. So then Narada Muni started to explain about Bhakti Yoga. This is a supreme activity. You should mention Lord Krishna. Then he gave his own example, how he met the sages, even at 5 years old, and he listened to them very intently. And by doing that, he became a great devotee. And then in the next chapter, in the sixth chapter, the sages left when it was the end of the rainy season, so he was asked by Shaunaka Rishi asked the sages. Vyasadeva, that was the fifth chapter. Then in the sixth chapter, Vyasadeva asked him, what did you do after that, when you left the company of the sages? And he explains how he was just under the care of his mother at 5 years old. And a snake bit his mother and she died. And so he had nobody to depend on but Krishna. And so he started wandering through the interior like a sannyasi, just, living how he could and experiencing the world. And at that point, he started meditating the way the sages had told him. And eventually Lord Krishna appeared, Vishnu appeared before him and gave him darshan. And then he disappeared. And he said, this is just to increase your desire to actually obtain me. He gave him his darshan. It's something he wouldn't forget very easily. So for the rest of his life, he carried on performing devotional service. And then he eventually left his body. And he was born at the end of that millennium. He entered into the body of the Supreme Lord, and then the next millennium he was born as Narada Muni. So he's giving an example how he achieved success in life. It's an example that encourages people who read the book. We want to see examples not just have, you know, the have the theory. So now that's brought us to the 6th chapter, and now we're on the 7th. This 7th chapter is called The Son of Drona Punished. So the son of Drona is Ashvatthama. And so after hearing from Narada Muni, he started to contemplate Vyasadeva on the banks of the Sarasvati. And then the Lord appeared, Vishnu appeared with his material energy at the side of him. And then he understood that this material energy is keeping everybody in material existence. And there's 3 nice verses in the beginning of this chapter which explain that the living entity thinks himself a material product, and therefore he suffers in this world. So Vyasadeva was experiencing this. And then he says, and the majority of people don't know how to get rid of the suffering, and it's by devotional service. And then the next verse says that, and devotional service is given in the Bhagavatam. It says, Yasyam by Shruyamananam Krishna Paramapurushe. That simply by giving oral reception to the Vedic literatures, to the Srimad Bhagavatam, all that is troublesome to the heart is destroyed. The feeling of transcendental loving service to the Lord is actually manifested immediately. So this is the beginning of the 7th chapter. And then, of course, Vyasadeva, he started to write about the Supreme Lord. He started to write the Bhagavatam in such a way that it included knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he instructed this to Shukadeva Goswami at that point. And actually, Shukadeva Goswami had been instructed previously when he was in the womb of his mother, Uttara. Not in Uttara, in the womb of his mother. And this was a secondary hearing. And people may ask, why did he want to hear Bhagavatam? He was already advanced on the path of self-realization. And so then the famous Atmarama verse comes in here, in the chapter, saying that all different kinds, everybody wants to know about Krishna, even those who are spiritually advanced. We call them Atmaramas. They're situated on the spiritual platform. They're not interested in material things. It says, therefore, if they want to hear about Krishna, that means Krishna must be spiritual. He's not material. So this point was made. And that ends this point where we start, where Shukadeva Goswami, or Sutta Goswami, sorry, the first question in the 4th chapter. Well, you know, where was the Bhagavatam written? Why?
Just a blank document. Sorry.
Yeah, blank.
Just a minute, let me not this.
How do I get a blank document?
Your mic is muted now.
You muted yourself, Maharaj.
I can hear you.
Okay, and so this concludes how the Bhagavatam was written. And so now we're going to deal with questions about Maharaj Parikshit. What's his history? He's the hero of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it starts actually fairly early. It starts about when Ashvatthama was, he was one of the survivors of the Battle of Kurukshetra. And he thought he would please his master Duryodhana by killing the heirs to the throne, the Pandavas. So that, you know, the dynasty would be finished, and because you know, Duryodhana, he'd been he was the unofficial head, unofficial king, and he'd lost that position because he was killed by Bhima. And while he was dying, Ashvatthama wanted to stop the Pandavas from ruling. So he thought he'd killed the Pandavas in their sleep, but actually he'd killed the sleeping sons of the Pandavas. And when he brought the heads to Duryodhana, he could understand that that wasn't the Pandavas, and he displeased his master. And so when Draupadi found out, obviously she's the mother of these sleeping sons, she was very overcome with grief. And so Arjuna immediately said, I will catch this culprit and bring him back, and you can take your bath standing on his head. And so this was a promise of a Kshatriya. So a Kshatriya's promise doesn't go in vain. So we'll hear about that in a little while. So Arjuna chased Ashvatthama, who was running for his life. He knew he couldn't beat Arjuna. And out of fear, he threw a Brahmastra weapon, like an atomic weapon at Arjuna. And this weapon, it covered all the sky, and Arjuna didn't know what it was. He said, a Brahmastra is like an atomic weapon, and it can create so much destruction. He says, but he was so frightened, Ashvatthama, that he didn't know the mantras for retrieving it. And so when Arjuna approached Krishna and asked, what do I do about this? He said, you throw your Brahmastra and then retract them both. And so Arjuna did that. And then he captured it and bound Ashvatthama. He brought him back to the camp where Draupadi and the Pandavas were. And immediately Draupadi, showing the nature of a devotee, she started to say, release this Ashvatthama. Don't forget, he's just killed the 5 of the sons. He said, release him. He's a Brahman, our spiritual master. By Dronacharya's mercy, you learnt the military arts from Dronacharya, his father. Now Drona's dead is represented by Ashvatthama, his son. And, Ashvatthama is a Brahmin, so disrespecting the Brahmins doesn't bring any good to the dynasty. It ruins the dynasty. And she was thinking about the mother of Ashvatthama. Don't make his mother cry like I've had to cry. Can you believe somebody praying like that? And so, this created a little bit of Krishna originally, when he caught up Ashvatthama, he told him to kill him immediately. He was testing Arjuna. And Arjuna didn't. When he came back to the camp, Draupadi said this. And then Yudhishthira and the other Pandavas, except for Bhima, they agreed that this is actually the proper course. Not to kill him, but because he's a son of a Brahmin. But Bhima, he angrily disagreed. He said, kill him immediately. So then, Arjuna was confused, and Krishna gave him a clue. He said, you have to simultaneously maintain your promise to Draupadi to kill him. You have to also follow her advice that he shouldn't be killed, and you should kill him because Bhima wants him to be killed. And so immediately, Arjuna was very intelligent. He could understand that he's a Brahma Bandhu, he's a fallen Brahman. And he says there's no injunction in the Shastra for a Brahman to be killed. So he immediately cut the top knot with a jewel, the Brahman's jewel. He took his caste away. And so actually he killed him in that respect. Dishonor is worse than death, but he still lived. So he fulfilled both arguments. And then this ends the 7th chapter. He says the prescribed punishments for a Brahma Bandhu never include killing, but rather cutting his hair, depriving him of his wealth, and driving him from his residence. Okay. So to say Ashvatthama is still alive today, roaming the earth, due to that curse. So then we come into prayers by Queen Kunti. This is the 8th chapter. So then after they'd settled that affair with Ashwatthama, then they buried, they did the funeral rites for the sons of the Pandavas. And then at that point, Lord Krishna was about to leave. And then Uttara is the wife of Maharaj Parikshit, or sorry, the mother of Maharaj Parikshit. She came running towards Krishna, asking for Krishna to save her. And she was being followed by this Brahmastra. So this, you know, what a culprit Ashwatthama is. He's been released. And now he's setting off another Brahmastra to, you know, and it was aimed at the womb of Uttara to destroy the embryo, which was Maharaj Parikshit. He released more than one Brahmastra, actually. He released several Brahmastras meant for all the Pandavas, but this was one of them. And so, of course, Lord Krishna immediately gave her protection. And he encircled the womb. This is explained later on in the later chapters. And so he saved Maharaj Parikshit in the womb. So this is, at this point, immediately that happened, Queen Kunti was there. And so Queen Kunti started offering prayers to Lord Krishna at this point. And there's a book now called The Teachings of Queen Kunti. And all these prayers are elaborated on in this book. I thought I'd just highlight the main points of these prayers, which gives it some here we are. Three prayers how to know Lord Krishna. Next prayers are how we are fortunate to be able to take Lord Krishna's service. Next prayers are qualification to approach the Lord. Next prayers, Lord's nature is inconceivable and bewildering. You know, there's that prayer. It's how he appears in this world, but he's unborn. He works. He seems to work in this world, but he's the source of everything. Why does he have to work? So this is all bewildering to her conditioned soul. And then the opinion, why does the Lord appear, she said. Is it to glorify the Yadu kings? Is it to fulfill the desire of Vasudeva and Devaki? Is it according to the desire of Lord Brahma, who prayed that he appeared? The real reason is to rejuvenate bhakti, to help the conditioned souls. He seems to appear for these other reasons, which are all spoken of in the Bhagavatam, but his real reason is to distribute bhakti. And last topic that she explains is how she, desires Lord Krishna's association. By the process of devotional service, we become more and more attracted to Lord Krishna. And therefore she prays, sever my family ties to the Yadavas and the Pandavas. She even wants to sever the ties to a close family so that she can obtain the Lord. And finally, she says that, what's that verse? There's one verse in the Bhagavatam, in this section, it's talking about, let my devotion be constantly drawn unto you, she's saying, as the river Ganges forever follows to the sea. So this is what she's ultimately desiring. So these are good prayers for a devotee to read through. It shows the whole process of praying to make advancement in devotional service. This is from verse 18 through to verse 43. Okay. And so at that point, Maharaj Yudhisthira, he was really aggrieved that he had to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. And he had to kill so many soldiers, so many people had suffered just so that he could take over the throne. And it's described as his Adbhuta Karmanam. you know, Krishna, ordinarily, Maharaj Yudhisthira was a devotee and he could understand the situation. And he could understand that he didn't have to, you know, that all this was the will of the Lord. But Krishna covered him just like he covered Arjuna, so that this Srimad Bhagavatam and this pastime could be spoken. And so Maharaj Yudhisthira is acting like a conditioned soul at this point. He's, you know, even though it's his, and therefore he's performing his service as a king, as a duty, he's not enjoying it. And because of his lamentation, Lord Krishna takes him to Bhishma Dev. This is the 9th chapter, where they go to Bhishma Dev's lying on a bed of arrows on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The battle's long over, but he's waiting for a suitable time to leave his body when the sun's travelling to the north, and when it's a light fortnight like that, bright fortnight, full moon. And so this time's quickly approaching, so Lord Krishna takes Maharaj Yudhisthira. And at that time, when Krishna appears with the Pandavas, all the demigods and all the great sages from the other planetary systems appear. And Bhishma Dev, although he's unable to move, he welcomes them with kind words. It says Bhishma Dev could not welcome physically. He did so by sweet words, with a hearty expression. So he encouraged the Pandavas and he prayed to them. He said that although your sons of Dharma did not deserve to be alive, under so much suffering you were protected by the Brahmins, Dharma, and a tutor. A tutor is Krishna. And he carries on, you know, revealing all the ways that they suffered. And then he said, he says, this is all performed by inevitable time. We're all under the influence of time and tide wait for no one. He says, nobody can understand the plan of the Lord. So he's giving an instruction that we have to be tolerant. So that brings us well into the 9th chapter. And Krishna gives many prayers to the Supreme Lord, glorifying his position. And then he starts to instruct Maharaj Yudhisthira. And he quotes stories as well as giving direct instruction. And first of all, he gives knowledge about different dharmas: Varna Shram Dham, Vairagya Dham, Raga Dham, Dana Dham, Raja Dham, the duties of a king, Moksha Dham, Stri Dham, the activities of a woman, and finally Bhagavat Dham. So Bhagavat Dham was given last because it was the most important. So Krishna spoke on a lot of subject matters, not just ultimately devotional service. And he classified Maharaj Yudhisthira. Maharaj Yudhisthira felt satisfied after he heard the instruction of Bhishma Dev. So Krishna was indirectly glorifying his devotee, although Bhishma Dev had gone through so many difficulties and appeared to be on the wrong side. At the end, Krishna gave him full glorification. Even the sages couldn't satisfy Maharaj Yudhisthira. Even Krishna couldn't satisfy Maharaj Yudhisthira. But Bhishma was able to actually satisfy Maharaj Yudhisthira. And then the time for Bhishma to leave his body came, and he offered many more prayers, which we won't speak about now. And then at the right moment, he fell silent and stopped speaking. He says, the man who spoke on many different battlefields on many different subjects stopped speaking. And then there was flowers rained from heaven, and drums and bugles sounded. And Bhishma Dev, he says that people generally think he got liberation, but actually devotees know that he went back to associate with the Lord eternally in the spiritual world, in the Lord's form of Partha Sarathi, as the chariot driver of Arjuna. This was Bhishma's relationship with the Lord, one in chivalry. So So then with the permission of Dhritarashtra and the approval of Krishna, Maharaj Yudhisthira then took the throne of the world. So we've just been dealing with a little bit of a history leading up to Maharaj Parikshit. You know, how he was in the womb and how he was saved by Lord Krishna. So it diverts a bit here. We're still on the topic of Maharaj Parikshit, but it describes the departure of Lord Krishna. So in this particular is that, you know, because Maharaj he was a pure devotee of the Lord, he nicely, he had all good qualities, and because he ruled the people according to Dharma, everybody was satisfied. And when Lord Krishna saw that he was ruling nicely, he decided to. And so, you know, they tried to ask him to stay, but at some point, you know, the Vedic custom is that when you ask somebody to stay, they'll stay a little while just to satisfy the host. But eventually, Lord Krishna decided to leave. And and so it describes in this Bhagavatam, you know, why he descends into this material world. Here's a few examples. Krishna is naturally attractive to all living beings. Once a relationship with Krishna is slightly revived, the conditioned soul becomes mad after his association. And so this was the main purpose, that he appears to attract the devotees. And as he was leaving, it says that the women went on the roof and they were, you know, shyly glorifying Krishna. And it says in this part that shyness is the main attribute of a woman. Everybody will respect somebody who's shy, a woman who's shy. This is a real beauty. And it says that the women were glorifying Krishna from the rooftops, and it says these glorifications were better than the Shruti, Vedas and the Upanishads. He says because those glorifications are indirect, but the glorification of the women of Hastinapur was actually direct glorification, and therefore pleasing to Lord Krishna. So then it rounds up by saying that this pure devotional service can be obtained by intensely applying the process. What's that verse in the Bhagavad Gita? Remember? Bhakti Mama Vijnanati Lavanyas Chasmitataha Vishite Tadansram. We can enter into the kingdom of God. So then Maharaj Yudhisthira accompanied Lord Krishna from the outskirts of Hastinapur for a long way, and with an entourage of his whole entourage, his whole army. But then eventually Lord Krishna asked him to return, and the Lord Krishna carried on towards Dwarka. So that ends the 10th chapter. Then the 11th chapter is Lord Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. We don't want to dwell too much on it. It's very descriptive of, you know, how he was welcomed and like that. Just say one thing here. It says that the queens could not satisfy the Lord by their feminine attractiveness, but they satisfied him. This is the queens of Dwarka. They satisfied him by their unalloyed, transcendental loving service and affection. Thus the Lord was pleased to treat them as his wives in meditation. So here it's making the point that all Krishna's pastimes, that Krishna is not, affected like it seems to be, we're talking about material activities, that he's not in the same mindset as a materialist. He's completely unattracted, but he reciprocates to please his devotee. So the queens were very attracted, so Krishna reciprocated in that way. Because Krishna is the attractor of Cupid. And Cupid's keeping this whole material world going. But we hear later how there's one more person who even attracts Krishna. So that she's not mentioned in the pages of the Bhagavatam directly. I don't think we need any guesses who that is. So. Then we go on to the 12th chapter. Birth of Maharaj. So he comes back to talking about Maharaj Pariksit after Lord Krishna disembarks to Dwarka and arrives in Dwarka. So Shaunaka Rishi is asking, about Maharaj Pariksit again. And then he goes into a little bit of detail how he was saved in the womb, how the Lord was only at thumb high, how all the little details there. And that he got his Brahmastra to protect again. And then eventually, because Maharaj Pariksit was saved in the womb, he saw the form of the Lord, and that's when he got the name Pariksit, one who was always searching, examining. When he'd seen that form, when he came out of the womb, he wanted to find that form again. And they also call him Vishnu Rata. Vishnu Rata means that he's protected by the Lord, like he was protected in the womb. So then Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired from the Brahmins about the future of the child. And so here, Srila Prabhupada gives a little bit of information which might be interesting about the difference between Brahmins and Vaishnavas. And there's a verse in the Shastras which explains that by birth everybody is Shudra. Then by second initiation one becomes Dvija. And then by studying the Shastra one becomes learned and one becomes Vipra. So we're starting from that platform, from Vipra, the first stage of Brahmanical. And they would mostly learn the material Shastras to satisfy the needs of the living entities, like, what is it? Ayurveda. They would learn Ayurveda and give treatment to society. They would learn astrology, which most people are interested in. So they would deal with Karma Kanda. But when they became more realized in Brahman, then they'd actually become Brahmins. And they could understand Brahman, and they became liberated. And then, even further than that, is Vaishnava. When we realize, when we fully understand the conclusion of the Shastra, that it's Lord Krishna, then Vaishnava Brahman, which is real Brahman, real Brahmanical platform. Understanding between Brahman. So, Maharaj Yudhisthira was approaching the Vipras, so they could, by astronomy, the future of the child. And he was glorified with all the qualities of all the great kings from the past. He had them all. He was exalted. Okay. So why did the Lord protect Maharaj Pariksit? There was two reasons. Would anybody like to offer?
The heir to the Pandavas? The heir to the Pandavas?
He was an heir to the throne, and Krishna,
Pandavas, yeah.
the dynasty of pious kings was upheld. was carried on so that they could actually prosecute or teach people about protect the process of devotional service. And the other one? He was a pure devotee. Of course, Krishna doesn't always protect the body. He protects the consciousness, but in this case, he protected the body because the body was needed for devotional service. Okay, yeah, so it says here, I'll just go. Vipras are interested in Karma Kanda. Brahmins are on the transcendental platform, Jnana Kanda. And then Upasana Kanda is, which culminates in Bhakti, is the Vaishnav's platform. Okay. So we're moving a lot faster today. This last one, we'll just do this one and then we'll finish there. This is about Dhritarashtra, the last one. So we now understand about Lord Maharaj Parikshit's birth and appearance. So at this point, Vidura enters the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vidura had been dealt with very roughly by Duryodhana. Duryodhana threw him out of the palace almost. He didn't physically throw him out, but he told him to get out of the palace because he was always telling Dhritarashtra, this son of yours is actually a nonsense, you should get rid of him. You know, Duryodhana eventually, he had enough. And he said, kick him out of the palace and leave him only with his breath. So he virtually did that. And so he went on pilgrimage. He saw it as a blessing. And this is where he met and heard about devotional service from Maya. So this will come later in the Bhagavatam. So when he actually came back from that pilgrimage, he came back to Hastinapur. And all the Maharaj Yudhisthira and the Pandavas greeted him and they asked about his travels and we went to Dwarka, what happened in Dwarka and who was there. And Maharaj Vidura answered all the questions. But he didn't tell them that actually at that point, the Yadu dynasty had been annihilated by a fratricidal fight. He didn't tell them that. So then the main reason that Vidura came back is going to be told now that the title of this chapter is called Dhritarashtra Quits Home. And so why did he quit home? All through his life, Lord Krishna had preached to him, everybody had preached to him, especially his stepbrother, who was Vidura. He was constantly giving him good guidance, and it wasn't appreciated by any of the Kaurava sons. And Dhritarashtra tolerated it, but he didn't follow his advice. And he once said to him, your advice is actually first class. It's it's nectarine, but he said, I cannot follow it. He said, I'm too attached to my sons. So now, at this point, the Battle of Kurukshetra was over, and all Dhritarashtra's sons had been killed, including Duryodhana. And so he had nothing. And so now he was residing in the palace in Hastinapur. And, you know, he was sort of, he was kept by the Pandavas who he tried to kill. And when Vidura understood the situation, he started to preach to him. So we can just give some of the prayers. Dear Rajan, get out immediately. Just see how fearful time has overtaken you. Fearful that death cannot be counteracted by anyone. It is the Supreme Lord, as Kala was approached, who has approached us all. Power of time. Time forces everyone to surrender everything, including wealth, honor, children, home, and even one's life. All your relatives died. Your father, brother, well-wishers and sons are all dead. Your body is overtaken by invalidity, and you are living in another's home. You were blind from birth, and now you are deaf, with shortened memory and loose teeth. Your digestion is weak, and you are coughing up mucus. Still you are attached. So we're so attached to this body, it's unbelievable. The body's hardly working properly, but he's still trying to maintain his life. Astonishing urge to live. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. You are living like a household dog taking food from Bhima. There is no need to live on the charity of those who you tried to kill by fire and poison, whose wife you insulted and whose wealth you stole. Despite your unwillingness to die, but to remain alive at the cost of honor, death is approaching you. Is one who goes to a remote place and freed from all obligation quits his material body when it has become useless. That's a Dhira. It says a Dhira is one who understands death is coming, so let me just let go of everything and just concentrate on the Supreme Brahman. Dhira means one who becomes sober. He understands the nature of this material world. He understands he's not the body, and therefore he concentrates at the end of life, or even through life, but especially at the end of life, on reuniting with his spiritual nature. But a higher class than that is called Naratam. That's a first class man, one who leaves home and develops indifference to material attachment, either by himself or through others' inspiration, to depend fully on Lord Hari residing in the heart. So, you know, Dhritarashtra hadn't cultivated that mood throughout his life. He'd been constantly acting in a sinful way. And therefore, he wasn't qualified to take up devotional service. He couldn't do it in that short time. So Vidura said, at least, you know, leave this situation and perform yoga and become a Dhira. You have not become an Naratam, therefore become a Dhira. Leave for the north and not the path of Dhira before Kali Yuga approaches. Dhritarashtra enlightened by Vidura, and so now he's at the end of life and he's got nothing to hang on to. You know, Vidura's words, even though they seem very cruel and sharp, they actually strike home. This is the sadhu cuts. So he cuts through that ignorance of Dhritarashtra with his words, and this time he actually hits the mark. Dhritarashtra, enlightened by Vidura, was firmly convinced by introspective knowledge, pragya. Cutting strong familial affection with determination, he left home to set out on the path of liberation. Sometimes devotees do that as well. You know, it's the same thing when you take up devotional service. There's so many things that we've actually become attached to throughout his life, and all of a sudden we think, now I've got to do this. So we take to the path. Not that we have to leave all that behind, of course, but that's a whole story. But at least Dhritarashtra did that. He had nothing to leave. And, you know, Gandhari, seeing that he was going to go, she followed him at her own risk. In other words, Dhritarashtra wasn't interested in looking after his wife anymore. He was just interested in self-realization. But his wife was so devoted that she went with him. And, you know, she practiced the same austerity that he did. Dhritarashtra accepted the Vanaprastha order. Therefore, his wife was allowed to remain as a voluntary servitor. But in the sannyas stage, no wife can stay with her former husband. Yudhisthira discovers their departure. So then, when the next morning, he didn't waste any time. He immediately left and went to the mountains. When Yudhisthira came the next morning and found that they'd left, both Gandhari, Dhritarashtra and Vidura, he spoke to Narada Muni and asked, first he asked Sanjaya, where's your master? And Sanjaya could understand what had happened. He was choked up. You know, this is a real servant, a real even though Dhritarashtra was not acting properly a lot of the time, because his position was to be servant, Sanjaya had become attached to his master, and he was so choked up he couldn't speak at first. And he said, I do not know about your uncles and aunt. I have been cheated by those great souls. And then at that point, Narada Muni arrived. And he asked him, I do not know where my uncles and ascetic aunt have gone. You are like a captain of a ship in a great ocean. You can direct us to our destination. So then Narada Muni started to tell him what had happened. And says that the Lord sets up everything in this material world and disperses everybody at the appropriate time. And so now it's a time for Dhritarashtra. There's nothing you can do about it. Lamentation in separation is only due to illusory affection. Whether you consider the self to be the soul or the body, neither or both. So there's nothing to be in this world. You know, on the material platform, everything comes and everything goes, and the devotee has to understand that. And then he says, give up your anxiety due to ignorance. You are now thinking of how your relatives, helpless creatures, will exist without you. How can anyone protect others when he himself is in the jaws of a serpent? The body is under the control of Kala, time, karma, and the guna modes. So we think we can actually help people in this world. Here Narada Muni is telling Yudhisthira, you can't help anybody, you can't even help yourself. Everybody's under these three things: time, the modes of nature, and what was the other one? The law of karma. So then he told him that then Narada starts to tell him the destination of the three great souls, Dhritarashtra, Gandhari and Vidura. He said, your uncles and aunt have gone to the Himalayas, to Saptasrota, the place where the Ganges was divided into 7 for the satisfaction of the Sapta Rishis. There, Dhritarashtra is now engaged in Astanga Yoga that results in control of the mind and senses, Upasamtatama, freedom from thoughts of family, absorption in Lord Hari, immunity from the contamination of the 3 modes. Dhritarashtra will merge into the Supreme Being, realizing his qualitative oneness with him, destroying all the impressions arising from the material modes of nature, stopping all enjoyment of the senses, all eating, renouncing material duties. He will be immovably established. 5 days from now, Dhritarashtra will give up his body by his own mystic power and turn it to ashes. Gandhari will undergo sati rites in the fire of her husband's body, together with the hut. Vidura will go for pilgrimage, both delighted and aggrieved at seeing this astonishing event. So why was it astonishing? Vidura was astonished to see Dhritarashtra's marvelous transformation, but at the same time he was sorry that he did not become a pure devotee. Dhritarashtra, being an offender, attained only liberation, not prema. Saying this, Narada Muni ascended. Maharaj Yudhisthira kept his instructions in his heart and was free from all lamentation. So we can stop there. So when the eyes start becoming dim, and we keep having to ask somebody to repeat what they're saying, and the teeth start wobbling when you're eating, then you know that it's time to become serious. But even Dhritarashtra couldn't become serious until he got the help of a devotee. We need somebody to come along and, you know, give us a reminder. So this is the beauty of an association of devotees. Okay, so thank you for being very patient. It's like a one-way, it's not like doing Bhagavad Gita overview. Bhagavad Gita, Bhakti Shastri, or usually I like there to be some interaction. But we decided to do an overview, so we'll carry on doing that. And try to make the best of it.
Maharaj, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You know the meeting of Narad Muni by Vasudev, and when Vasudev compiled this Srimad Bhagavatam, is that after Lord Krishna sort of left this planet?
Just repeat that again.
So when Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam, the timing, was that after Lord Krishna left this planet?
Yes.
So after the departure of Lord Krishna, he wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam then?
Yeah. It was after the battle of. I'm not sure about that. I'd have to do some research. I'm not sure. Let's have a think. Maharaj, yes. Yeah, because I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure. I have to do a little bit of research to find that.
Okay, Maharaj, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm very sorry. I didn't realize when I started it was on unmute. Very sorry about the disturbance, Maharaj.
About the what?
Disturbance, you know, it was.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's all right.
Maharaj, this is a question about Arjuna killing Dronacharya. You know, the Bhagavad Gita was told because he did wrong, so he can be killed. But why, when it come to Ashwatthama, why the Pandavas show the compassion? Because he's also Brahmana. Dronacharya was Brahmana, so Ashwatthama is Brahma Bandhu. So just I was thinking it's.
Well, actually, when Dronacharya was killed, he was killed by Drishtadyumna. And nobody liked what Drishtadyumna did because Dronacharya thought his son had been killed, Ashwatthama, and therefore he stopped fighting. And so Drishtadyumna took the opportunity to kill him. And so nobody sanctioned that. So it wasn't a very, you know, so I'm not saying that it was the right thing to do. But in this case with Ashwatthama, he was a Brahma Bandhu. Means he was a fallen son of a Brahmin because he committed such heinous activities, brahminical activities. And therefore the injunctions in the Shastras, as we've just read, that he shouldn't be killed. But he said he should be deprived of his wealth, his caste should be taken away from him, and he should be kicked out from the association of Brahmins. And that's what happened. So he was killed. His caste was killed. He wasn't a Brahmin anymore. He was dishonored, and that's as good as death. So there's no injunction for killing a Brahman Bandhu.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. I don't think there's an injunction for killing a Brahmin even, actually. But I'm not 100% sure. Anything else? Okay, so next week we can start with chapter 14. So if you want to read the translations, we'll, from chapter 14, we'll try to go to the end of the chapter. And then we can start the week after on the second canto. Okay? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, that
Hare
was
Krishna.
nice.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.